Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of HeartMind Happy Hour. It's a beautiful Friday here in Lander, Wyoming, and I'm really excited today for the conversation with Jason Romero, who's a frequent poster on the HeartMind Alchemy Project, and he's been posting some really cool graphs about the iTHRVE breath work that his breath work that he records on iTHRVE. And there's been a lot of interest, and a lot of folks have asked about it, and myself included have wondered about it. And I'm just super excited to have him here today to tell us all about it and give us a primer and tell us a little bit about his story. So welcome, Jason.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Great to be here, Holly.
Thank you so much. So yeah, really excited. I just so this is I think I forgot to say this is HeartMind Happy Hour. I'm your host, Holly Copeland. I'm a human potential coach. I'm a biohacker sort of myself, and I also do one-on-one coaching, and I manage the HeartMind Alchemy Project page. And I'm just super excited lately. There has been so much activity and people, Sammy and Randy and others posting and sharing, and it's just wonderful to see. And Jason and I will talk a little bit about the site and his excitement about it too, which I'm really excited to hear his perspective. And like I said, this iTHRVE has got just a wealth of information. There's so much there, and it's a little confusing, to be honest. I went in and looked at it and tried to use it and didn't really understand what I was looking at, and haven't been able to take the time to really understand it. So Jason has taken the time, and so I'm really excited to discuss it with him. So so Jason's here with us. He is coming to us from Maui, which I'm very envious of. I'd love to live somewhere tropical myself someday. And he himself is a biohacker, as you all know on the show. And then he's also a free diver and into hiking and lots of outdoor activities. And so that's a little bit about his background. But Jason, I'd really love it if you would just start by telling us a little bit about your story and kind of how you came to be here posting graphs and doing breath work and meditation on HeartMind Alchemy Project.
Yeah, so I've been biohacking on and off since 2009, 2010. I got into it because mainly for the health reasons was I had anxiety disorder, and so I dealt with a lot of panic attacks and things like that, and breath work and meditation became something that I was able to do to help and manage that. That was something that it's been able to carry on with me, and I've been inconsistent through the years about it, but finally meeting a like-minded group, the HeartMind Alchemy page, and so that's been, I think it was right when the COVID hit. I didn't really have my day job is I'm in the wedding industry, so I set up weddings and stuff, which is a very fast-paced go type of job, so that never really helped with my anxiety. So all the more breath work and meditation helped me to be able to perform better in that setting as well. And so when COVID hit, especially for health wise, HRV and meditation and things like that, reduction in stress, less stress in the body, you're less likely to get sick. It builds the immune system strength. So I began really getting back into, iTHRVE. I'd used it for some time before when the app first came out, a few years before that, but I've never been that consistent. But then finding a group to share with and meeting other people has been really motivating and very encouraging, and such a blessing you know, to meet like-minded people like yourself and all the other wonderful people there. And so that's just been, you know, that, and using Muse as well, and that combined with, you know, the iTHRVE app, you know, it's HeartMind alchemy, right? You got your Muse headset doing brainwaves, and you got, you know, iTHRVE doing the heart. So, and
Yep. It all comes together to change hearts and minds, right? Yeah, absolutely.
and so, yeah, in addition to using it for stress and anxiety, you know, I was a heavy smoker for many years, you know, 7, 8 years, and because it helped with my anxiety, and or so I thought it did, but eventually it seemed to make my anxiety worse. So at a certain point, I, you know, had to stop, and then what I replaced it with was, you know, just breathing and meditation, and you know, it's free. Don't have to, you know, pay for it. I can do it anytime, anywhere I am. And so, yeah, dealing with addiction, it's been very, you know, beneficial for that. In some ways, I'd say, you know, completely, you know, alleviated me of that, you know. And then in addition to that, you know, for physical performance, like you do a lot of free diving, I do calisthenics, hiking. So, and especially free diving, you know, you're swimming in the water with, you know, sharks and other predators like that. You got to be able to stay calm and not freak out if you see a shark, you know, and being able to, you know, hold my breath. You know, when you're holding your breath, you get that feeling, that urge to breathe, and you feel anxious. You feel like you can't hold your breath any longer, but it's all in the mind. And you know, learning how to, you know, just meditate in that moment, and you know, it's helped me perform better with regards to that. You know, I'm also a musician, so in regards to meditation and breath work, you know, getting in that flow state, you know, a state of open creativeness. I do a lot of like improvised type of music, so it's just kind of whatever comes to me at the moment. So, you know, being in that open state where you're just creative on the moment, you know, meditation and breath work have definitely helped me access those different states of consciousness, and, you know, perform, and, you know, all various, you know, things like that. I think essentially, you can apply it to anything, and you know, that's why they call it like peak performance, right? It's whatever you're performing in, you know, you can reduce that anxiety and that, you know, overthinking and those things, and get more in the moment, be present, and you know, biohack that way, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely. What an inspiring story, truly. It's wonderful to hear. And I think it really speaks to, you know, a number of things. It speaks to the quantified self movement, you know, where people are really taking charge of their own health and using tools like, you know, Muse headset and HRV, to, you know, trackers to learn about their own body and then use it as a motivating factor to
Right.
meditate, or you know, do breath work exercises. And your story reminds me, you know, on the addiction side of Dr. Judd Brewer at Brown University has been a leader in that field and has been able to show that meditation is as effective and possibly more for addictions as any of the leading conventional treatments. So you probably doesn't surprise you, but you know, I think a lot of people that might surprise.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing that, you know, before, if you wanted to go get HRV analysis or an EEG analysis, you'd have to go and pay thousands of dollars. And now it's like, it's all on, you know, our phones with these apps, and it's all affordable, and it's all available there to us.
Right.
And yeah, it's a wonderful thing that I've become very interested in, obsessed with the past
Yeah.
I think 10 years. And it was I originally had some awakening type experiences, which were sort of through these anxiety or panic attacks, where I would become aware of these strange sensations in my body, or feelings of energy moving through my body that I wasn't sure what it was. And the normal medical diagnosis is like, oh, it's something pathological. They call it a panic attack or anxiety disorder. And I was doing research on it, reading how in Kundalini is very essentially the same symptoms, and it's the way that we integrate that into our lives, and picking up spiritual practices that allow us to understand our body and become aware of that present moment when these things happen. And it's really transformed those anxious experiences later in my life into very blissful experiences of being in tune with these processes in my body. And it was about 10 years ago, I randomly stumbled across one of Dan Winter's videos on YouTube, and started listening to what he had to say, and I was just blown away, because to me it made so much sense intuitively. And he had pioneered a lot of work on EEG and HRV, heart coherence and brain coherence. So I was very interested in that. But at the time, his hardware that he offered, which was for Windows computers, I think originally the Heart Tuner and the Bliss Tuner, which measured HRV and brain waves. At that time I was young, 18, 19 years old. They're like, $2,000-$3,000 piece of hardware, so I couldn't really afford it, but then now, 8 years later, they've got it all in the iPhones now, and he's essentially taken all that research he's done and, put it into the iTHRVE app and the Flame and Mind app. And so that's been a very amazing blessing on his part to make his work shareable. And you mentioned addiction. I think one of the studies that he mentions on how they would take people that were alcoholics and measure their brain waves. When they would drink alcohol, the alpha would go up in their brain waves, and then when they weren't drinking alcohol, they wouldn't be able to make the alpha. And so when they taught the alcoholic how to close their eyes and visualize and make the alpha, that was the end of their addiction. They no longer, and then in some cases, I think they said the alcohol would even make them sick when they would drink it, instead of making them feel good, because they've learned how to turn the lights back on internally, not needing that external source for bliss, but being able to just go within and tap into that, which is like a human right we all have, to have access to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, and teaching people how to do that themselves, and then allowing them to do things like use iTHRVE to, in order to kind of to track it. I think it's so powerful.
Right.
And as you said, once you have the software, it's free, breath work and meditation are free.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
It's just the initial investment,
Yeah.
And it's not even that, it's a couple $100 and that's it.
Yeah. Well, so I'd love to dive in with you. I'm sure people are super excited to kind of learn about, I'd love to hear about the breathwork practices you do and the meditation practices, and then connect them to the like iTHRVE app, for example, and what some of these graphs are. So maybe you want to start by just describing your practice, if that makes sense, and then I'll share my screen and we can look at one of these iTHRVE readouts.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So essentially, when I do my breathwork practices, I'm always posture is so important. So either lotus position, with the back straight, but you want it comfortable so that you're not sitting on too much tension. In the beginning, it was a little bit uncomfortable, but over time, you kind of find that center of gravity. So posture. Another way I'll do it is I'll just sit on the edge of the chair with my feet flat on the floor, with my back straight, and and then just sort of going into that meditative state where I'm just being aware of the present moment, tuning into the breath, being aware of my breath as it goes in and out, feeling my body move with it. As you inhale, really feeling your diaphragm and making sure you're focusing on breathing from your diaphragm, not too much from the chest, because you get a much deeper, fuller expansion of the lungs, breathing from your diaphragm. And from there, taking it slow in the beginning. It's important in the beginning. You don't want to make yourself, hyperventilate too much. Although there's benefits of intermittent hyperventilation, but it can be just a little bit uncomfortable for people in the beginning if you're not used to that. And usually I'll start, slow in the beginning and just feeling the breath. And I always think of it as like dancing with the breath as you feel the body rise and fall and kind of just, flowing with it. It's kind of hard to describe. It's one of those things you feel it in that moment. You don't want to try too hard. It's sort of that, in Taoism, Wu Wei.
Yeah,
Wu
Wei. Doing,
right?
not doing. Yep.
And so sort of, getting in tune with that. And, in the beginning, when I share this with people, I tell them, don't worry too much about whether you're breathing only out of your mouth or what, just breathe. I feel like, most people I've spoken to have never really sat down, and like the people that I share this with that want to learn, never really sat down to actually breathe like this. So when they breathe like this, it feels a little strange for them. And so, I just said breathe, if you feel comfortable breathing only out of your mouth, if some practices do, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Sometimes I have seasonal allergies and things like that. So sometimes my nose is a little bit clogged up. So, I'll breathe out of my mouth. And, fully in, but not to the point of where you feel yourself forcing air in, but as much as you can. And then on the exhale, I always emphasize on letting go. You just want to try and soften the body and feel all your muscles relax as you let go, feeling gravity just sort of, it's that sinking feeling, and relaxing all the muscles in the body on that exhale. And then as you inhale, have that sense of awareness, it's sort of energizing on the inhale, and then relaxing on the exhale, and breathing into that stillness. It's sort of at the peak of the breath. It's sort of like, it reminds me of, it's like when you're driving in a car, and if you brake too hard, it's jerky. But if you brake just right, you don't even really feel it. So it's the same thing when I try to do these breath exercises, to breathe into the stillness and that sense of where you um, move into it slowly and gracefully in that sense. And the same thing, the exhale. And usually anywhere from, during the day, I'll do them periodically for, 5 minutes, but when I have more time, I'll go 10, 20 minutes doing these breath exercises. And then to just sort of, go with your body. If you feel like you're hyperventilating and it makes you feel uncomfortable, it's okay to breathe a little bit more shallow, just kind of go, listen to your body is such an important thing. Even though we do have these apps that give us feedback, it's also important to listen to the body, and if something doesn't feel right, to, back off or change,
Are you, so is this essentially Dan Winter's technique? Is that kind of what you're following?
Well,
is this something you
that a
adapt?
little bit. This is just pranayama.
Yeah.
Pranayama that I've learned through different books I've read and different people I've spoken to, and just my own sort of self exploration. That now Dan Winter's work, his work. So, and I guess this type of breathing, I would say, it's a little more related to like HeartMath's work on that type of breathing where the wave of your respiration, the sine wave, it has that continuous sine wave sort of shape in the HRV, where your timing is equal each breath in and out.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like in this part you're not doing any breath holds like a Wim Hof or a Soma or anything like that. You're just
and so there's maybe in between each breath I'm pausing for maybe 1 or 2 seconds as I inhale, and then pause in that silence, then exhale, and then pause in that silence and repeat. And the iTHRVE app has you can customize a timer in there for the inhale, for the hold in between each inhale and exhale. So I utilize that a lot. It also has a bunch of presets in there as well for different breathing frequencies. And so that's a classical HeartMath way that they teach heart coherence. Dan Winter takes that a step further. And this is based off of work by medical doctor Ari Goldberger. He has a lot of research online about this. I think Richard Jervitz, I think is what his name is. He's another guy. He has a lot of great videos on YouTube. He also talks about this, how when they looked at heart rates and HRV, heart rate variability, that parts that had this sort of sine wave pattern that was just continuous was actually more associated with people that had cardiac problems, which is really interesting because it's a little bit counterintuitive in that sense, because it's saying that your heart rate is staying the same, like kind of like a flatline heart rate, right? So it was only looking at coherence of a single frequency of your breathing. And so when they actually looked at healthy hearts, they found that there's actually a very random looking pattern in the heart rate that was, not what the people teaching the heart coherence work. It seemed very counterintuitive. So it was actually showing that a lot of different frequencies in the heart is what a healthy heart looked like. And when the frequencies became limited to only having, 1 or 2 different frequencies in HRV measurements, it was a predictor of disease and things like that, cardiac arrest. So this is where it becomes a distinction between measuring resting heart rate variability and then biofeedback heart rate variability. They're two slightly different things. So when you do heart coherence exercises, you do these, like breathing at 5 cycles or 6 cycles a minute, which is 6 breaths a minute. You get that sine wave type pattern. And that in the biofeedback work, when they research it, that does trigger, vagal tone. It slows down the sympathetic nervous system, fires up the parasympathetic nervous system. But that is sort of just the foundation for where this goes. And so with Dan Winter's work is he took, because, HeartMath looked at what frequency was the strongest. So looking at a single frequency, but Dan Winter looked at what the whole spectrum looked like in regards to how healthy HRV looked. And so there is a large number of different frequencies. And so he developed a breathing technique. Well, I don't know if he developed it, but he taught it, called the caduceus breath. So the caduceus is the symbol of Hermes. You see the 2 snakes, and they kind of create that, a bigger wave and a smaller wave and a smaller wave. So he taught this, I think he called it the exercise of the spin path to the 0 point. And so you would breathe a deep breath in and out, and then the next breath you would actually do it progressively shorter, both in time and both in the depth of the breath. And then you would do another one progressively shorter, until you reach that still point. And so that would create an increase in what he called internal heart coherence. And so internal heart coherence is, he developed a technique. It's a second order power spectrum. So it's the coherence of the coherence. So they were taking, HeartMath single frequency coherence, but then they were looking at all the different frequencies that were also present in smaller amounts, and then adding those all together, and then that would create a bigger peak. And then so they found that as there's increased frequencies throughout the spectrum, as opposed to just having one frequency, that the overall internal coherence would go up. And so that was, that's what in the iTHRVE app is the FFT3 measurement in there. And it actually, the iTHRVE app has the classical single frequency coherence that HeartMath does, as well as the FFT3 fast Fourier transform third order power spectrum that Dan Winter pioneered. And so that is actually a little bit, it's different than the conventional HeartMath breathing technique, but it's still, again, it's sort of like they're built upon each other. For beginners, doing pranayama, paced breathing like that is excellent. And it works, for, like, I've used it for reducing anxiety and things like that. But there's also this, when I do these exercises that, like this caduceus breath, and there's also one I've sort of come up with on my own using the iTHRVE app, where I essentially just spend 5 minutes breathing at a longer frequency. Then I spend another 5 minutes at a slightly shorter frequency, and then another 5 minutes at a slightly less, so it's sort of like extending that over a period of 15 or 20 minutes. And in the iTHRVE app, that actually builds that spectrum where there's lots of different frequencies in the spectrum, rather than just breathing at a single pace for 20 minutes. And then you get one strong frequency, but all the other frequencies around it are really low. And so it actually, in Dan Winter's work, when he talks about heart coherence, and this sort of ties into his brainwave, his biofeedback with the brainwaves, and along with all his physics equations and things like that, on how he calls it harmonic inclusiveness. So there's a large number of different frequencies that are all able to cohere and focus together without drowning each other out. And so it's sort of like he describes coherence as a difference between a flashlight and a laser. When the heart gets coherent, now it's like a laser. It's focused. And so when they would, study heart rate variability and, whether or not what a healthy immune system looked like, they found that having a large number of different harmonics was an indicator of health. But when the frequencies were missing in that spectrum, or there is only one frequency present, and this is in just measuring HRV separately from the biofeedback, it was always a predictor of some sort of disease. And they would actually find that by breathing, finding those missing frequencies and learning how to breathe in a way that replaces them could actually result in healing emotionally, physically. Very interesting work. And so this goes into his work on how the heart as an electric field has this, there's entropy, everything in that sort of, goes toward disorder or equilibrium. Like you said, a hot cup of coffee on the table, eventually it gets cold. So neg entropy or negative entropy is the opposite of that, where it's what the body does when the body heals, is it's restoring itself to that state of greater order. It's something that's negative entropy. So it's the opposite of chaos. It's restored order. And so when you look at heart harmonics, they're looking for harmonics that are conducive to creating that that picture, which looks like a caduceus. It looks like especially in the HRV, you get a very classic caduceus type shape. And so essentially he describes it as, literally the electric field, your aura or your charge of your body is getting coherent, getting focused, and it's able to organize itself. And I won't go down the rabbit hole too much with that. But essentially it works off of the principle of synergy, which is something that mathematician Buckminster Fuller talked about, where there's different shapes in nature. You see geometry all over nature. And if you take like a building that's a square or a cube, like our typical buildings are, and you build it taller and taller and bigger, it actually becomes less stable, where there's more tension bearing down on the bottom of the structure. And so it actually becomes less stable the bigger it gets. So what Buckminster Fuller found is that when you use shapes like a dodecahedron or an icosahedron, which are essentially a bunch of triangles all stacked together. If you've seen the geodesic domes and like Epcot Center and Disney World and things like that, these are synergistic structures where the bigger they get, the more stable they become. So because there's a distribution of the pressure within that structure is the most efficient it can be. And so that can be mapped with the golden ratio. You see that shape all over nature, pine cones, sunflowers, in our DNA, all over the human body. And then so the interesting thing was that it was seen in the HRV. And so iTHRVE actually will show if there's golden ratio harmonics in your heart rate variability. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was going to say that's awesome, and that's a great lead-in to. I know I'm sensitive to time, and I know people want to see kind of also where is that? That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested and intrigued by Dan Winter's work on kind of what you were talking about earlier about not just one frequency through breathing, but promoting multiple different frequencies, and then how you can track that in something like iTHRVE, as opposed to the sort of single frequency metric like HeartMath.
And it's not to say that that's wrong or bad or anything. It's just that it's useful and it's as a foundation for learning to breathe. And then one thing I'll note is that in classic HRV, they talked about resonance breathing. And breathing at that 0.1 hertz, it's about 6 cycles a minute. So 6 breaths a minute, and the benefits of that, because that syncs up with your barrel reflex, your blood pressure. So your heart rate actually becomes in resonance with your breathing and with your blood pressure in your body. And then so that blood pressure wave, in the literature, it's sometimes referred to as the Mayer wave. Dan Winter's work has shown that is what the Kundalini pump is in the spine.
Oh.
And so that Mayer wave, as people that do sacrocranial work, they can actually feel that low frequency wave. And so learning how to breathe at that 0.1 hertz, that 6 cycles a minute, it varies from person to person. It will be between anywhere from 6 to 4 cycles a minute. But for the average population, it's about 6 cycles a minute. And the interesting thing is Dan Winter came up with a really amazing equation that shows how hydrogen and DNA and all these things all relate to golden ratio in physics. And he essentially can calculate all these, precisely, like the hydrogen radii very precisely from his equations, independent of other measurements, which is really one of those coincidences.
Yeah.
And so what falls out of that equation is this 0.1 hertz in the HRV, and so it all nests in that sort of fractal geometry,
sacred geometry
all
in the body, right? That's fascinating, because I'm definitely, I'm aware of the sacred geometry in nature and of course within our bodies, but to now tie it into breathing and how you could access Kundalini energy, for example, which is certainly something I'm kind of working on in my own personal journey. So, to have a tool like using iTHRVE to help track that, like, am I on track from a breathing perspective? What you're saying is you could actually use this tool to help guide breathing to get and use the science that Dan has kind of come up with to help support that. That's what you're saying, right?
And now we know it's science now. It's not just a sacred geometry type of, people will say, oh, it's pseudoscience or whatever, but it's actually, and there's plenty of people other than Dan's work that are coming out showing that, you just take a look at DNA and there's golden ratio all over it. I mean, you look at, galaxies and black holes now and all these things that they're finding these golden ratio relationships. And it's this very, sort of revealing this sort of interconnectedness between all things, and, how breath ties in with all of
with
that.
that.
Is the
It's like mind blowing. So, okay, so show us. I'm like, no, I want to see because I want to practice this with the iTHRVE tonight.
yeah.
So I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Hold on just a sec.
Also, I'll share it on the group. I did make a video a few months back on how to do a recording with iTHRVE.
Oh, yes, please do. And we can put in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Like that. If you have a video that shows, that would be great. And then
Yeah.
other, like if you have favorite Dan Winters videos that kind of show the technique, I think that would be great to share with people. You know, any kind of resources you have, I think that'd be wonderful. Okay. So can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Great. And so what's best if we want to maybe go into one of these, or do you think this is sufficient?
Yeah, just click that first one there. Yeah, that'll be great. So this is what we're looking at is after you've done a recording, you'll have a series of screens that show your progress over time. These are in regards to the last 4 minutes of the breathing in a session. What your peak frequencies are. So you can see here this purple graph right in the middle. That's the HRV that's showing the different peaks within the spectrum. It's the fast Fourier transform third order. So here it's showing that I was breathing at 3.5 breaths a minute.
Okay.
So
the short side in this example, right?
Yeah. So this is actually a little bit of a slower breath. And so you can see that peak there is right up on that line. And there's those 3 white lines there, 3.5, 5.7, and 9.2. Those are actually showing golden ratio harmonics based off of Dan Winters' equation.
Oh,
so the actual frequencies that create, as he talks about, create and build the hydrogen atom and, create self-organization, in our universe. And that 5.7 is very close to that 6 breaths a minute. So that's that 0.1 hertz peak there.
Okay.
And so you can actually see that there's a small peak getting close to it. And so when you look at these graphs, it's not always about wanting to get it exactly perfect. You just want to get it close because everybody's body is different. It's something that sort of it's approached. Like the golden ratio. It's a ratio. It's an infinite series of numbers. It's not actually a number. It's something that you get closer and closer to over time. So, wanting to get it exactly perfect is sort of, don't worry about that.
Okay. And then tell us a little bit. So what's this showing here?
So that is showing what the strongest harmonic relationships are with regards to music. So if you look on the left side, on the bottom left, you see, over there, 1.11, 2.21. Those are showing harmonic relationships between the third strongest and the second strongest peak during your session, and it's giving you a musical ratio. So just like in when I'm a piano player, so this makes total sense to me because it's the difference between playing a octave and a fifth or a fourth or something like that. So for music people, this is very on that sort of the technical side of that. So on that, again, on that right chart, it's showing, 2 is showing that there is an octave harmonic in there. Then 1.6 is showing if there's a golden ratio harmonic. Then 1.5, I believe it's a fifth.
Oops, wait. It went away. Okay, wait. I don't even know how it switched. Okay, there we go. Back to that. So you were describing the fifths and the sixth. Is that here or were you over somewhere else?
That was both there and
Uh-huh.
back to that screen on the right that you were originally showing
You mean
with the numbers.
Oh,
A
this,
little bit, yeah, that one, yeah. So those are related to what musical, essentially it's your heart's musical key signature, what musical notes your heart is singing.
oh,
And
how cool. I'm a musician as well, so I'm definitely.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's just essentially you're taking, it's looking at, you know, say 60 beats a minute, 70 beats a minute. Those can be equated to musical notes and like in music theory.
Right.
And so the app actually draws those relationships musically here on that chart there. And any of those, see the green dot where the 2 is
Yeah.
showing the octave. Yeah, that's showing that I landed on that harmonic. So there's gray dots on the bottom showing that in this session I was in between. Anywhere on the line is a musical relationship.
Any of these lines is a
Like a
musical.
chord.
Yeah.
Yeah, a chord basically.
A chord. Okay. Got it. And so you were right on this one, and then your others were not. They were in between.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And
so that
this is presumably showing actually which notes it would correspond to.
Yes, this is showing what the strongest harmonics are and the weakest harmonics are and the notes.
Okay.
So it's showing, you know, here my musical key was in G.
Yeah.
Because it's the highest peak. And then so that actually can be correlated to, I actually did a post yesterday about this, on the work that this comes from Mary Sol Sterling, biosonica.org. They measured how there's different frequencies that can be measured from the different parts of the body using a frequency scanner. And so from, you know, the head to the toe, there's a whole range of frequencies, and they can be correlated to musical notes, and they can actually be correlated to meridians from Chinese medicine. And so that by learning to breathe in these certain frequencies, because you can actually, you know, 5 cycles or the 6 cycles, 0.1 hertz is actually equivalent to a G sharp note musically. So the different breathing cycles that you can turn on, play through the iTHRVE app that you can follow as a cue have relationships to musical notes. And so there's, I haven't gone too much into using this part of the app yet, but it's intentionally is sort of a way to look at what harmonics are missing. And then you can actually do breathing exercises or, you know, listen to music to try to replace those harmonics in order to, you know, heal the body or emotionally. There's even work that Dan has done that showed that when 2 hearts are firing coherently at the same frequency, there's actually a resonant entrainment that happens between them, like entanglement in physics, so that information can actually be shared emotionally between people. And so he actually says that this can be looked at as a way of quantifying empathy between 2 people that are able to get their, you know, you can actually cause it the marriage counselor's dream. You can actually have, you know, 2 people that have an emotional problem, and they can learn to breathe together, and then they learn to feel together, and then you can feel as what the other person is feeling, you know, inside of yourself, and then you become a fractal attractor, and, you know, problems are resolved. And so it actually can even, you know, goes into sort of a political approach to, you know, how can this be applied to, you know, politics, and it's just a totally different way of going
Right.
about day-to-day interactions. It's a very amazing thing. I haven't gone too much into that part of it. Like I said, I know sort of what it can do, but I haven't really utilized it too much for myself yet.
Yeah, that really reminds me of the consciousness hacking movement. If you've gone to the consciousness hacking website, and I'm gonna drop the name of the guy who is kind of the founder of that. I'm so sorry, I can't remember his name. I'll have to put it in the show notes. But he has been doing work where people sit in a, like this was pre-COVID, but they would sit in a room in a circle and they would all have, instrumentation on to track their heart rates, and they would breathe together in a whole room and show just what you're saying about kind of unified coherence among the whole group, and how they could affect each other through that. And then they could track the data to sort of see that. It's totally fascinating work. And like you said, it's a completely different approach to how we approach human relationships.
Right.
Think about, whether it's a marriage or a friendship or a partnership, that you could, instead of trying to talk through a situation, maybe start by breathing together and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it makes me think too, like I have a music group that I co-host on Saturdays in our town, like a jam session.
Oh, nice.
And there's something really magical about it. It's like we don't really, we have people from all different walks of life and all different political viewpoints, and it feels like it doesn't matter. Like there's cohesion in the group because we're playing music together. And you would know this too as a musician. It's like I'm sure if we were all, had instrumentation on, you would see that we all come into coherence because we're literally playing music together. But I can't imagine, based on what you're saying, that the body isn't following.
Absolutely. There's some really interesting work I've seen done on how listening to music and you're watching, the coherence in the heart dance with the music. There's actually David from our group. He's shown, he actually used Dan Winter's heart tuner, original gizmo. And he has a blog and he has some videos where he shows, how he listens to music, and his heart coherence literally communicates with him and dances along with the music with him. It's very
wow. This is David Olart, right?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's definitely something that I would like to explore more.
We'll share some stuff.
Okay, and then before we leave this page, so you've got this, presumably this is very low frequency, high frequency.
Yeah, and that's just showing the percentage of
each
in that spectrum, right?
Okay.
And then below that is just showing how high the LF-HF ratio is. So the ratio between that. Then it's just showing LF1, LF2, LF3. Those are the 3 strongest frequencies in the spectrum. And then below that is showing the relationship between those 3 strongest frequencies, which creates the musical chords that we see there.
Yeah. And so when you were breathing here at 3, I can see there's a white line here. So there's a strong harmonic. So this must be your 2 that you're
Well, the white lines will always be the same. They're just showing the golden ratio relationship between with where they land in the spectrum. But I was using a cue to purposely breathe at that 3.5 cycles there.
Right. And hit this golden ratio down one at 3.5. Lower than the 0.1 hertz, obviously.
Right. And so I think in this one, I was actually working my way toward the 1 hertz over the course of the session, and the sort of, I like to call it the extended caduceus breathing, because it's sort of over a period of time. And then I'll note too, there's the score there is related to the amount of HRV, the variability, you know, between the hearts. So if there's more depth within the HRV, as you breathe in, your heart rate goes up. As you breathe out, it slows down. The more difference there is between that highest heart rate in the in-breath and the lowest rate on the out-breath, creates more amplitude in that peak there, which is why the peak is so tall. And then that also affects whether the score is up or down.
So do you want a high score? Do you want a high number?
For the HRV biofeedback, yes, essentially you want to get a higher score, but if you're just measuring resting HRV, it's not really, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be different for everybody depending on the time of day and all that sort of thing. And then the score will also change depending on if you're more stressed out or not. So it can actually give you an indication of how your body's changing, especially when you track it over time, which iTHRVE does have a graphing system that you can actually look at weeks or months of records to see how your HRV goes up and down. And you can kind of, ask yourself, how was I feeling this day? Or what did I do this day? What did I eat? Because all of those things affect HRV.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's, how about we scoot to the next page? This looks like just kind of a basic, almost HeartMath style readout.
Yep. So this is essentially showing, so at the top of the screen, we'll focus on the coherence, the white one, where it says there's a little tab. If you go above coherent, yeah, so that's the white line. So that's the classic HeartMath coherence.
Okay.
So that's the single frequency coherence there. And so I was breathing at 2.5 cycles. And again, this is showing the last 4 minutes of that breathing session. Okay. And so the next to it, that pink or the purple, is the FFT3. So that's the broad spectral coherence. Dan Winter's what he pioneered, looking at all the different frequencies in the heart and how, if those frequencies add up together to create a bigger peak. Okay.
So when I look here, I see like you're not quite in the green for the FFT. But kind of
this session, I was actually, I think it was this last night. I think I was, this from last night. I think I was a little bit nervous about today's show. So I noticed my heart rate here is actually, it's above 60 on its lowest point. When on some of my better charts, I'm even below 50. Okay. So this is actually a good example of how heart rate variability, it changes with how we feel about ourselves, what's happening in our lives, and so that purple, it's a little bit in the yellow there, not quite as high as usual. And then next to that, there's this, you see on the top left, there's the low frequency to high frequency ratio.
Looks like it's maybe in here somewhere. Can't quite tell.
I actually don't think I think that's I don't think I toggled it on, because you can you click those buttons and you can toggle it on and off. But if you look next to the LFHF, there's short-term stress and long-term stress. So I think that's what those are. Okay, so those are actually pretty good. Yeah, so those are showing that those are pretty good here during the breathing. And then you go below that, there's this coherence. I think the top bar is single frequency coherence, showing how much percent of the time you're in the red, yellow, or the green. And then below that one is the FFT3 coherence. Okay. Showing the percentages of the times. And then below that is the HRV graph, just with the different, how your heart rate changes with breathing, so. Okay, so this is the single frequency, everybody, and this is the FFT frequency or coherence, and it's the FFT coherence, right? So ideally, in a Dan Winters scenario, you want to have
you know, more
Yeah.
of this in the green would be better.
Yeah, you would actually want to focus more on having that in the green
Mhm.
than even having the white in the green.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense based on
Yeah.
everything you said previously about why
Right.
we want that.
Right.
Okay. Great.
And then here is just another, I think it's again showing the last 4 minutes, but you actually at the top, you have an option to toggle between the first 2 minutes or the last 2 minutes. So you can actually zoom in on that with the
a little
app.
bit of a zoom in. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
And then this is showing the entire session, what the most focused frequency was.
Yeah.
And then
So
you can
it's
actually,
like a more detailed version of that one that was on the summary page.
right. So this is the detailed one on the summary page is a smoothing out of this graph.
Got it.
So this shows the individual frequencies. You can see like for example, at 7, so
Mhm.
that's 7 cycles, there's a peak there. And then
Yeah.
so that is indicative of resonance. Here we
Okay.
can see, because as I'm breathing at this 3.5 cycles, as there's this resonance happens in the HRV, you get an additional frequency doubled of that. So
Okay.
3.5 times 2 is 7. And then if you look a little bit ahead of that at about 10.5, you see another smaller frequency still. So as you create resonance through breathing, it actually does create that sort of caduceus
Wait.
shape.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
so cool. So this is happening naturally just by, right? Just
yeah,
by
this is
breathing.
just as I'm breathing at that 3.5 cycles.
Yeah. It's like,
creates
it's
these
all, to me, it feels like your body's creating these ripples out.
It is, exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool, Jason. To see it, right? Like just
yeah.
something so simple as breath work and then see it broken down here like this is just, it's really sweet.
Right. And then you can actually see these. So at the bottom under the graph, there's gold and then mine. And so gold is the golden ratio frequencies related to Dan Winter's equation. And then mine, it actually shows golden ratio frequencies that are related to your own personal peak. So if I was breathing at 4 cycles a minute,
Mm-hmm.
the one that says mine, the pink lines, will actually show additional frequencies, whether or not they had golden ratios relative to that peak. So it's actually sort of your heart's own golden ratio frequencies as opposed to the ones that are from Dan's equation.
Okay, and what I see here is that yours are pretty closely matched to what's in Dan's equation. Am I right? Am I?
Yeah, yes, I do see. I see a couple there.
Yeah.
A small one at around 5.6, 5.7,
Yeah.
and a small one at 9.
And maybe even here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe
Not on this biggest peak.
What's that?
Not on the biggest peak.
No, yeah. There's one on the biggest.
Is there one on the biggest peak too? Okay.
They're overlapped. So the blue lines and the pink lines are overlapped because I'm lined up to that golden ratio frequency from Dan's equation. But if you were to shift your breath from that, it would actually show all the lines separated from each other.
Okay.
Showing all the individual frequencies.
Okay. This is so cool. Okay, so tell us about this one.
And then so this is actually showing the individual bands of the spectrum analysis. So at the top there is the HRV, the red.
Mm-hmm.
So heart rate as it changes over time. And again, this is the last 4 minutes of the session. And then there is the blue line there is the low frequencies. Okay. So notice how the low frequencies wave is actually lined up with the red. Because because that's the frequency I was breathing in, was in the low frequency range. So
You
it's
mean this
actually-
red? They're like
Yeah.
all,
They're all lined up.
yeah,
So
I
essentially,
see.
it's a smoothing out of that graph in the low frequency range. And then so the red or the orange line there that's overlapped, that's the very low frequency. So that's sort of the wave on the wave.
Yeah.
So if you kind of look at it, you can kind of see how it changes with the height of the peaks. If you were to sort of trace the peaks of the blue line and draw a line, it's a lower frequency. So it's sort of like a wave on a wave, sort of like a braid.
You're talking about this line here?
Yeah, the orange.
The orange line. And so I guess I'm not quite seeing where the pattern is on that. I mean, I see the wave, but I'm not quite seeing. It does look like it's higher when this is higher. Is that what you're saying?
Right, right. You can kind of see that there's a relationship between how it changes. So if you were to breathe that,
Or lower, I should say.
if you were to breathe in a very low frequency,
Mhm.
like say 2 breaths a minute, that orange wave would actually sync up with the HRV. It's just it's a reflection of what the frequencies are, but it's sort of like, it's like a braid. It's like you have a lot of small frequencies in, like, you know, it's a rope made up of string, but then you can take that rope and braid it into a bigger rope.
Okay.
And so that's sort of what's going on here musically, is that there's harmonics nested within each other. And so this is just a breakdown of the single band. So then the purple is the high frequency. So you can see that the high frequency is much more details in it. And so that those are the shorter frequencies toward the higher end of the spectrum.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit technical. I mean, if you sort of need to be like someone that analyzes waveforms and knows all the mathematics behind it and stuff to understand it. But that's one of the really interesting things about this app, is it does provide the really technical side of it for those that are interested in that.
I always appreciate that as a data scientist. I like to be able to see the details. Yeah. So this looks like another session. This is a completely different session.
Yeah. So this is now here. I was doing 4 cycles a minute. So 4.5 breaths.
A little faster breathing.
Yeah, a little bit faster breathing. You can see that the purple, where the tall purple peak is, it's not lined up with the 3.5 anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You can see it's shifted. So this is, so there's, you know, resonant breathing. So this is one of the cool things you can also do with this app, is you can breathe at different cycles and take a recording, and then you look for what cycles give you the biggest peak.
Okay.
And so the cycles that give you the biggest peak show that you have strong resonance there.
You know, Michael Smith's been on our show twice, actually, and he's talked a lot about resonant breathing and how he does, you know, helps people track their resonant breathing. So you're saying I can use this app to discover that for myself?
You can find what it is, yeah, by looking at what gives you the biggest peak and the biggest score. You want to go through there's cues in the app, and you can go through, you know, every single cue and adjust the time. I mean, I did this and I adjusted the time by 2 seconds and went through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And found I think there's 3 particular frequencies that give me the highest peaks.
And when you say highest peaks, you mean this peak, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you use that app in order to find where your highest peaks were, and maybe this highest number.
Yeah, and you look for what
Okay.
where these numbers are the highest, where the peak is the highest. And then you kind of, and it's interesting is that when I did find those resonant breathing rates, I noticed that it just feels so much natural to breathe at those frequencies. As if I shift just a little bit, the peak really goes down and I feel, out of breath. So you can kind of, use your body to kind of read to find that.
Well, and that goes into my question, which was going to be kind of, once you find your resonant frequencies, what do you do with it? What's the step you take?
That you spend, 5 to 10 minutes a day, breathing at those frequencies every day, and so.
And would the goal be to train yourself then to breathe at those resonant frequencies like throughout the day then?
So what's interesting is what happens is as you do these exercises, I found that, especially in my meditations, that I'll start to naturally breathe at these frequencies during my meditation without trying anymore. So I imagine that during the day when you get into a peak flow state, when you're going, that your body naturally has learned that the heart's a muscle, right? So there's, sort of this muscle memory that goes on. And, so you learn, when you feel stressed or when you feel you need to recharge or get grounded, those are the breathing frequencies you would want to use during your session. And I think they say, I think that it's 20 minutes a day, but they say 20 minutes a day because people will only really do about 10 minutes a day.
Well, and I Dr. Smith said that too, like that he works with people and they do resonant breathing, 10 minutes twice a day, something like that. And and I think that, as I'm remembering, I think that was actually what he was saying, was that once you do that, you'll train your heart and then you will start to actually breathe in these resonance frequencies throughout the day and during meditation. So you're training yourself to breathe in a way that that is synchronized with your body. It makes so much sense, when you think about it that way. And so I'm looking here and I'm seeing, okay, this one actually here, you've got the multi-frequency high coherence at 90%. Yeah. So that's amazing. What a difference between the two, right?
Right.
And that's that single one. And then here's the more detailed graph.
So here you can actually see where the pink and the blue lines are separated from each other, showing where the harmonics from Dan's equation where yours are.
Okay, great. And then this graph, we can see these sort of synchronous sine waves that are happening at these different frequencies within. Cool. Oh, look, and then there's one where you were dead spot on the Meyer wave. Look at that. Okay, but the number here is much lower than the others.
It was much lower there. There is just one of those days where I wasn't for whatever reason. And there's so many things that influence heart rate variability, and so I was feeling a little bit out of breath here during the session. You can actually see I was having a much more difficult time at the shorter breathing cycle here during this particular session. Though at the end, you can kind of see I did get a little bit more variability. So you can really see here the difference between the variability, right? That in the first half of it, the sine waves are really small. Right. And in the second part of it, I got more in tune. And then they got much more depth in the difference from 60 to 100 beats per minute rather than 70 to 80, and then you can see the pink line went all the way to the top at that point.
I see that. Fantastic. Wow, this is so interesting to look at. Well, I'm mindful of time. I know that here's one. Look at this with the really
Yeah.
high there. Or maybe we're back at the beginning. Okay. I was like, oh, it's all different. No, it's the one we looked at before.
No, and I'll say too that I did. So I think I did this session last night, and after I did this oftentimes I'll use breath work as sort of a way to like get myself ready for meditation. Like I'll do the preparation. So then I just got my muse yesterday. So I did a session with the muse, really great meditation. And then I went back and I did one more 5-minute breathing at 3.5 cycles. And it was just like night and day. My heart rate was all the way back down to as low as 50, and my score went up to like over 400 from, being at 300. And like, so it just really shows like how just taking that time to meditate also influences the body. And it's sort of like that feedback where, what we think and what we feel influences how what our body's doing. And what our body does, our body releases chemicals that make us continue to feel a certain way and reinforces that, and so that's sort of something I learned, like, dealing with anxiety is like the more, I'd have anxiety and be like, oh, I need to get rid of this anxiety. Then I'd be anxious about wanting to get rid of my anxiety, and it would just make me more anxious, so once I learned to, let go, meditate and all that stuff, it's sort of, shut that off. And then, I feel more relaxed. I feel more, at peace. And so it's all comes around full circle,
Totally. Oh, such an inspiring story. One last thing before we close up. What devices do you use to track? Do you use a Bluetooth clip like HeartMath, or do you use a strap?
Let me see if I can. I got a couple here. So this is the polar chest strap. You just wear it around your chest like that. Obviously not outside your shirt, but
do you think that's the best, better than your clip, or are they equivalent?
The chest strap is, I'd say, by far the most reliable. I believe it's because it uses actual EKG. So it's actually recording the electrical signals, whereas I think the ear clip is PPG, so it's using light sensor. And then there's also Berry finger clip.
Okay.
This actually can track your blood pressure wave. So that's another thing in the app that we didn't get into too much, but it actually tracks that Mayer wave. So you can actually, and only the Berry finger clip does that. It's not perfect. I think they need some work on it, maybe a different sensor to track this, but there's a lot of interesting potential there with regards to tracking that spine liquid pump, for Kundalini and all that stuff like that, which is really amazing to be able to track something like that.
Wait, well, I don't even know what that means. Spine liquid pump for Kundalini.
So
tell me about that.
Your spine, there's cerebral spinal fluid,
right,
and constantly being pumped through your body,
right.
And so there's a low frequency pressure wave that 0.1 hertz. That's your blood pressure wave. That's all part of this system in the body that's pumping, your fluids through your body.
Okay.
And during onset of Kundalini, there's resonance with that 0.1 hertz within the body, where the blood pressure wave becomes in phase with the heart rate and with the breathing. So that's sort of how Dan's work has come to measure Kundalini, which is his teacher, I think, was Itzhak Bentov. Ben Bentov, the book Stalking the Wild Pendulum. They measured the ventricles of the brain. They fill and empty with fluid from the spine, which is like a pump, the liquid pump of the spine. and they would measure the frequency of that. They would measure all these really amazing things with going on physiologically with people that have these bliss kundalini type experiences. And with these apps, we're able to track it, and sort of I think some people kind of say it demystifies it, maybe takes some of the excitement out of it, but I think it actually adds to it because it's so much more profound that we can actually teach it, and that we can actually make it something that's really shareable and empowering, and not something that you need to, depend on a guru or depend on something outside of yourself to discover what it is, but we can actually take the time to, eventually learn how to sustain that within ourselves and, discover that within ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, I would love it if you could help me put together like a list of resources, like a link to that and some of the others, and then we'll post that with the video, which we'll post on Facebook. And then I also post these on YouTube so we can have the resources for people when I post the YouTube video. Was that, will
Wonderful.
you help me do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm sure a lot of what you've said has really intrigued people, and they're going to want to be able to go discover these resources for themselves. So I am just, blown away by your knowledge and expertise in this, and just really appreciative of your willingness to share with us, as I'm sure people watching are super appreciative. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you and I were talking before we got on the call about the HeartMind Alchemy project and the community and how inspiring it's been to you. And it was just really, really meant a lot to me. And it's very heartfelt to hear how we could use, these tools that can be so distracting, like social media, to also be really positive, which it sounds like it has been for you.
Right, absolutely. I think that, technology, it's so powerful, and we're sort of exploring new territory with technology. Like, no, we never had cell phones before. We never had this stuff before. And it's sort of like collectively the human race is learning what it's like to have these, such powerful tools that are at our disposal. And we don't really know the full capacity of what we can use them for. And, it just shows that, it can go either way. It can, if we choose to live in fear and worry and things like that, then it'll become that. But if we choose to, use it to something that becomes self-empowering, to teach others, I think, you and me were able to talk to each other from thousands of miles away pretty much instantaneously. Like, that's, we're connected in that sense. And I think, technology and the internet embodies that sort of spiritual connection and different ways that it can manifest. And, we're sharing this information, that, so many people are listening to and will be interested in. And, in that sense, we're distributing that, those harmonics. We're becoming that harmonic, inclusive, fractal distribution of, life force and charge. We're becoming that, like when I talked about earlier about how there's certain shapes that, are synergistic, where the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts, where we come together to create something that's even more powerful than us individually, because we're together, and sort of ride that wave, ride that frequency.
Yeah, I love it. Such wise words. And I loved the harmonic distribution of fractal frequency for the force, or something like that you said. I'll have to go back and see. That's so cool. Yes, such wise words. And I so agree with you. We have a choice. We can use this technology to bring us down, in fear and anger, we can also use this technology to empower us and to bring us together and for the enlightenment and betterment of everybody. And I choose the latter, and you choose the latter, and all the people on HeartMind Alchemy Project choose the latter. So, you know, that's, we're co-creating the community together, and it's really awesome, right? So, and you know, to that note, if there are people watching who are on the community who have expertise in something that would like to share it like Jason does, reach out to me and I'd love to host you on the show, because it strikes me that this sharing that we're doing is very empowering, you know, and it's a wonderful way to connect. So please do reach out if you feel like you have something to share and contribute. So, well, thank you, Jason, so much for this. Now I'm super excited to go dive into iTHRVE and calculate my resonance frequency using it. And yeah, so we'll be, look for my graphs. I'll be posting some.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
And, yeah, and everybody else, I want to see them. Sorry, what did you say?
I said thank you for having me. Thank you for this.
You're so welcome. All right, everybody. Thank you for those who are watching, and we will see you. I'll be on next week around this time, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. And goodbye.
Bye.
All right, we're off live stream.